I mean, I'm so negative about myself always, but the first time I feel so proud of myself.
Andrei Rublev just pulled out one of the biggest Uno reverse cards in tennis history, and it was a beautiful ending to an otherwise tragic week. A week that saw the best players in the world dropping out of tournaments like flies because of injuries. Rafael Nadal playing potentially his last tennis match in Spain, Novak Djokovic's latest update, and even the Tsitsidosa breakup. When it rains, it pours. That's probably the best way to describe what happened last week in Madrid. Or maybe not. Here's an even better way to summarize what's been going on the tennis tour.
What happened in Monte Carlo happened, and what happened in Barcelona happened, and what happened in Madrid happened. And here we are. We are in Rome.
Buckle up, guys, it's about to get ugly. For the first time in the tournament's history, none of the top 6 seeds on the ATP side made it to the semifinals in Madrid. Why did that happen? There's a short and a long answer. The short answer, and the much simpler one, would be that the Madrid Masters 1000 was cursed this year. But I'm not sure that helped, so let's dig a little deeper and see how last week's result can help the Italian Open predictions. Earlier in the week, Andrei Rublev already complained about the new Masters format, saying that players will now have less time to recover and that it was mentally tough because the ATP was taking decisions without asking anybody. Instead of playing Madrid and Rome in one week, the tournaments now take longer and players have less time to spend at home. Alexander Zverev also chipped in, saying that the new format was good for players ranked outside the top 50, but not so much for top 10 players. His logic was that top 10 players compete to win the tournaments, so it takes a toll on them, since they're playing longer, generally speaking. Elena Rybakina also weighed in on the matter. In her words, quote, "Having so many 2-week mandatory events scheduled back-to-back, if you want to see good quality tennis and players have long careers, it would be nice to change something. With the new rule of change, we have a lot of mandatory stuff where you cannot really choose and pick what you want to play, because, I mean, at some point, it's fair enough that people choose what they want to play or not, because if the tour is good for everyone, then people will want to play," end quote. Personally, I think the devil is in the details. The players' needs should come first, and then ours as fans. So with that said, what do you prefer? 1-week tournaments for the Masters 1000s or 2 weeks in the current format? The top seeds on the ATP Tour were totally decimated in Madrid. Top seed Jannik Sinner withdrew from his quarterfinal match. Alcaraz lost to Rublev and complained of experienced discomfort during the match. Number 3 seed Medvedev retired in the quarters against Lehechka after the first set. And 4th seed Zverev lost to Cerundolo in the 4th round. Number 5 seed Casper Ruud lost to Felix also in the 4th round, and 6th seed Tsitsipas didn't even make it past the 2nd round, losing to Thiago Monteiro. Who would have imagined? And now, with some of these injuries carrying over to Rome, Alcaraz and Sinner are not going to be playing in Italy. You have to go back in time to Hamburg 2006 to find a somewhat similar pattern. Back then, the top 4 players in the world, Federer, Nadal, Nalbandian, and Roddick, all withdrew from the Masters 1000 tournament. So how did we get here? Starting with Carlitos, who just turned 21 last week. He had the chance to pass Rafa's record for longest win streak in Madrid after going through Shevchenko, Seyboth Wild, and Jan-Lennard Struff. He still had a forehand sleeve on the court, and while Carlitos wasn't exactly at his lethal best during those matches, he was still getting the job done, and even making these highlight reels. The Carlos engine seemed to be revving up a bit, until he ran into a certain guy named Andrei Rublev. But it's even more poetic that Carlos shares the 14-match winning streak with Rafa. I'll take that. For Jannik Sinner, who we just made a video about, it's a different story altogether. His charge to the number 1 spot has been dealt a huge blow because of his hip injury. And now, after saying that he'll only play Roland Garros if he's at 100%, we have some possible scenarios that could play out in the number 1 fight. At the moment, Djokovic has 9,990 points and Sinner has 8,860 points. Novak has 180 points to defend in Rome and 2,000 points at Roland Garros. Meanwhile, Sinner only has 90 points to defend in Rome and 45 points at Roland Garros. Subtract those points from their current ranking points, and we're left with a difference of 915 points. This essentially means that Djokovic must get more than 915 points in Rome and Roland Garros to maintain the first place. And that's assuming that Sinner doesn't play at all in the French Open. For that to happen, Djokovic needs to do one of the following: reach the final at Roland Garros, win Rome, reach the final in Rome and at least the quarterfinals in Roland Garros, or reach the semis in Roland Garros and the quarterfinals in Rome. Now, Novak Djokovic just split with his longtime fitness trainer, but I reckon it shouldn't be too much of a problem for him to reach those targets. Meanwhile, the draw for the Italian Open is already out, and we're going to be discussing it later in the video. But first, let's go through the highlights from this past week in tennis. The excitement around Andrei Rublev is at a fever pitch. He's now joined an exclusive list of active players with Clay Masters 1000 titles at least 2 different Clay Masters tournaments. Before the tournament, Rublev was winless through about 6 weeks, give or take. He came to Madrid off of 4 consecutive losses. What's even crazier is that Rublev struggled with an illness in Madrid, and he later told us that he barely slept between the matches. But somehow, he managed to go through Facundo Bagnis, Davidovich Fokina, and Tallon Griekspoor in straight sets, before setting up a blockbuster clash with Alcaraz. After losing his first set of the tournament, Rublev cranked up his shot-making wizardry to take the second set. And as the match went down to the wire in the final set, this happened. And from then on, there was no going back. Rublev took his winning streak to 13-0 against Spanish players on clay. After the match, Carlos had this to say.
He hits the ball in a good position. It's almost impossible to make points to beat him.
Now in the semis, Rublev faced Taylor Fritz, who was on a mission to prove that Americans can compete on European clay at the game's highest level. Fritz had just become the first American man since 2005 to reach the Madrid semifinals. That's almost like 2 decades without any American man in the semis. Fritz had also just made it to 250 career match wins and had been riding the hot hand ever since Ben Shelton took that American #1 spot from him temporarily. But when they stepped on the court, Rublev sometimes made Fritz feel helpless with some excellent shot making. At the end of the day, it was a mountain too tall for Fritz to climb, a straight sets loss to Rublev. Meanwhile, someone else in the other half of the draw was having the tournament of his life. Felix Auger-Aliassime had a clear path to the final. After taking down Nishioka and Mannarino in the early rounds, Felix then faced Menchik, who had to retire early in the second set. Felix would then get his most impressive victory of the tournament, defeating Casper Ruud in straight sets in the round of 16. Who would have thought that someone who won most of his titles on indoor hard courts would be defeating someone who could be considered a clay court specialist in straight sets? If only we knew that it was one of the many surprises awaiting us in Madrid. Luck was on Felix's side as he got an express entry into the semis after Sinner retired. Yeah, such a bummer, I know. Facing Yuri Lehechka in the semis, Felix then only played 6 games with Lehechka before the Czech retired. At this point, Felix could have claimed the title of luckiest tennis player on his business card, and no one would have bothered with him. A large section of fans believed the Canadian was an undeserving finalist, while a few fans were happy for him. Let me take you back to the Felix video I made, where we talked about some of the challenges he's been facing. He's low-key been making minor adjustments here and there, and now we know that FAA is no longer working with Tony Nadal. Tony was never the full-time coach anyway. He was more of an advisor. Now in the final in Madrid, Felix became the second player to progress through the draw after 3 players retired since Novak Djokovic at the 2016 US Open. With the spotlight now set on a big first serve plus big forehand showdown, we expected lots of fireworks, and the match didn't disappoint, at least in my opinion. Rublev had a 4-1 head-to-head record over Felix ahead of the final, so he was the obvious favorite, but not by a clear margin because all except one of their matches had gone the distance. As expected, the stakes were high for both players. Rublev was chasing a second Masters 1000 title, and Felix was chasing a first big title and his 200th tour level win. But it was Felix who came out swinging early on. Rublev, on the other hand, was double faulting early in the match and looked sick at times. However, he grew into the match as the games progressed, and you could see the difference midway into the set. Rublev got back one of the 2 breaks he gave away to Felix early on and was on the verge of leveling the set, but Felix stood his ground and eventually took care of business. By the second set, Rublev was finding more joy behind his first serve. But the match remained close until Rublev broke Felix right at the death in this point right here. The match stayed tight going into the third, but while Rublev was dictating points on his first serve and also doing a great job protecting on his second serve, Felix was getting smoked on his second serves.
Yes.
Another thing that I noticed was that although both players were deadly on the forehand, Rublev's backhand cross-court and down the line was a lot more superior to Felix's, and we could see the difference play out in the extended rallies. Felix began to experience some physical issues in the third set despite being the much fresher player. And while serving to stay in the match at 5-6, he double faulted twice. That was it. Madrid now had a new champion. So guys, if we're to summarize some of the major factors in this final, we'd have 4 main takeaways. Felix's poor second serves. He won only 14 out of 39 second serves the entire match. So even if he didn't double fault, it's not like he had a great chance at winning the point. Another huge factor would be Andrei Rublev's serves. He's done a great job upgrading his second serve and is no longer so vulnerable on it. Also, we already mentioned Rublev's superior backhand being a major factor in the rallies. And then there's the return, which I'll talk about a bit more. Rublev won 40% of first serve returns against Alcaraz in the quarterfinal. Against Taylor Fritz, the return numbers dropped a bit to 31% of points won on Fritz's first serve. Against Felix, Rublev pounced on the Canadian's second serves, winning a staggering 64% of return points. Why is this important? We previously identified Rublev's poor return as one of the major contributors to his 4-match losing streak. But in Madrid, he was on a different level. For Felix, on the other hand, he's now back inside the top 20 for the first time since October last year, and he'll be hoping to build on his Madrid run going forward. For fans asking if Felix is back, well, I can't say for sure. It doesn't really look like a whole lot has changed on the surface, but if he starts making consistent deep runs in the next tournaments, I think that's a conversation we can start having. I should also point out that after his title win, Rublev wrote this on the camera. "Samadi, now I'm free." I can't say I know exactly what he meant, but a quick Google search shows that Rublev probably might have been doing some meditation or mental concentration exercise to help him out. Let's now touch on some of the other storylines from week 18 on the tennis tour. But before we get into that, I'm super pumped to announce that we're going to be releasing some merch in the next few weeks. And the best part is that you are going to have the opportunity to pick our very first designs, so be on the lookout for a community post very soon. More to come there. Anyways, back to the video.
And you're actually the first Czech in the semis at a Masters since Thomas Berdych here in 2015.
Jiří Lehečka became the first Czech player in the semis of a Masters since Thomas Berdych in 2015. And although he retired in the semis and is now withdrawn from Rome due to the injury, I feel like we need to keep him on our radar. For those of you that have been sleeping on him, you've been missing out on a lot. The guy has the firepower to take the racket out of anyone's hands, and we saw that on full display in Madrid. And how about this?
Oh, come on. Oh, come on.
Let's also remember that Lehečka beat Tsitsipas and Rublev at Indian Wells, and also beat Karen Khachanov in Dubai. I feel like he has top 10 potential. But there were some question marks following his comments on Pedro Cachin asking for Rafa's shirt. Lehečka said, quote, "If you're playing a match and thinking about asking the guy to give you something, why are you there?" He explained that he wasn't trying to sound disrespectful though, and then explained that he might have asked for a picture after the tournament, but not for a shirt after just losing. He said, quote, "I don't know. I just don't go into a match with those kind of intentions, and I just have a different approach in this thing," end quote. But guys, Cachin probably dreamed his whole life about having the chance to play his idol, so I don't see anything wrong with him asking for a shirt at the end. What do you guys think? And what would you have done if you had the chance to play against your idol in a tennis match? Meanwhile, Rafa is going to play in Rome for the first time in 723 days. He's won the tournament 10 times, and really, there isn't much to talk about on what to expect from him, but in the Rome predictions later on in the video, I'll let you know what I think. Let's also not forget that 2024 is the final season for another veteran. Diego Schwartzman has announced that this will be his last year on tour. He'll retire in 2025 in Buenos Aires. Despite his obvious height disadvantage, Schwartzman managed to reach a Grand Slam semifinal at the 2020 French Open and a career high of number 8 in the world. This guy only fell out of the top 30 last year after being a constant presence there since 2017. The 31-year-old Schwartzman, who's been struggling to get past the first round of tournaments for a while now, opened up on being sad about his performances earlier in the year. But I'm pretty sure he'll be proud of everything he's achieved in his career. Beating Nadal in Rome, beating Dominic Thiem in 5 sets at Roland Garros, taking Djokovic to 5 sets. That's some unbelievable stuff. Many of us forget how good Diego Schwartzman really was. I think he made the most out of his potential. But speaking of potential, I've been particularly impressed with some next-gen players this year. Jakub Menchik made a splash earlier this year in Doha when he defeated Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, Andy Murray, top seed Andrei Rublev, and Gael Monfils en route to the final. He also defeated Grigor Dimitrov in Madrid for his second top 10 win in his first year on tour, and I feel like he's the best prospect out of the next gen. His serve is elite and smooth flowing, and his firepower and consistency off both wings is insane. But while his firepower is impressive, his movement is even better. I haven't seen that many guys move better at 6'4". Menchik's serve and volleying isn't the most spectacular, but he's already looking to add to that part of his game. It was such a shame to see him retire in Madrid. And then we have Joao Fonseca, who's only 17 and has limited tour experience, but judging from his few matches that I've watched, I think he's one of the brightest talents among the next gen. He also beat Mikkelsen in Madrid. Fonseca has that huge forehand, movement, and anticipation. His serve isn't bad too, but it still requires some work. We still need to see him on other surfaces as well before making a complete judgment. For Alex Mikkelsen, the kid has done well. He's beaten a top 10 player in Alex de Minaur and is also the youngest player from the United States to win an ATP Masters 1000 match since Taylor Fritz and Frances Tiafoe in 2017. I love his drop shots, two-handed backhand, and his serve is also pretty good. But being around the same height as Menchik, Mikkelsen's movement, court coverage, and athleticism isn't quite there, at least in my opinion. And when you look at Luca Van Asch, who at 5'10" is among the shortest guys in the top 100, you begin to wonder if he has enough firepower to trouble elite players down the line. We also have Shang, who beat Ben Shelton twice last year, also beat Frances Tiafoe, and then pushed Rublev to 3 sets in Hong Kong. The lefty serve is great, and his forehand is indeed destructive, but his consistency also isn't quite there at the moment. In Arthur Fils' case, he had his breakthrough season last year and is quite well-rounded at the moment as well. And then there's Dino Prismic, who we haven't seen much of since he took a set from Novak Djokovic at the Australian Open. Here's how the next-gen race is looking at the moment. If you were to rate these next-gen guys, who would you have at the top of your list, and why do you have them above the others? For me, I have Menchik as my number 1, but curious to hear what you guys think. Switching gears to the WTA, a lot happened last week. Iga Swiatek finally won the elusive Madrid title in what was the longest WTA 1000 final in history. It was an early match of the year contender for me. After a nervy start to the match, both players started to play more freely midway through the first set. Sabalenka, as usual, was crushing the ball off both wings. Swiatek, on the other hand, was up to the task with some immaculate returning, and she was able to steal the first set 7-5. So Sabalenka decided to turn the match into a dogfight in the second set, blasting winners from all over the court. Take a look at how she took the second set.
And why not?
The match was now dead even in the third set, and it was as if both players were fighting for their lives. But Sabalenka had the edge and kept pushing. Now facing down match points, Iga needed to do this to stay alive. The third set dragged into a tiebreak, even though Sabalenka held multiple match points herself en route. The key in the tiebreak was definitely Iga's clutch serving. She hit 5 service winners out of her 8 service points. Most of these serves were body serves aimed at Sabalenka's forehand. That's something Sabalenka will probably want to take a look at moving forward. With the title, Iga has now joined an exclusive list of women to win 20 or more titles before the age of 23. She also had to save a total of 3 championship points to do that. Iga has now also won every clay court WTA 1000 event. Here's my takeaway from the match. It was super close, as we can see from the stats, but I was incredibly impressed with the quality from both of them. Iga especially because of her performance on the fast clay court. If you're still sleeping on the WTA, the action, the storylines, I don't know what to tell you at this point. Iga's tennis IQ is also out of this world. She's been serving everyone breadsticks and bagels all tournament, but seeing Sabalenka push her to the limit tells you just how good Sabalenka is as well. Let's also not forget that Sabalenka came from a set down to defeat Elena Rybakina in the semis, putting an end to Rybakina's streak of 16 consecutive clay court wins. Man, these 3 are now forming a new big 3 on the WTA Tour. Someone out there might be asking why I didn't include the world number 3 Coco Gauff there. I think the answer's simple: the consistency and repeatability of results. That being said, I can't wait for Coco to find her best tennis. But in the meantime, here's to many more finals from these two.
Too many more finals. Always,
a challenge playing against you, so thanks for also motivating me.
But it would be a big omission to not talk about one of the best performers from last week. I've always loved watching Madison Keys play. I think she's an extremely talented player. I feel like she deserves more at 29 years old, and it was especially tough to see her miss the start of the season due to an injury. But after defeating two top 10 players, Ons Jabeur and Coco Gauff last week with incredible comeback wins, I'm hoping the 2017 US Open finalist can find her best tennis again too. Also, last year's WTA Newcomer of the Year, Mira Andreeva, made her first WTA 1000 quarterfinal in Madrid on her 17th birthday, no less. It goes without saying that we can expect a lot more from her in the coming months. Meanwhile, these are the major ranking updates from both tours. Felix Auger-Aliassime, one of the biggest movers of the week, is up 15 spots and is back inside the top 20 after reaching the final in Madrid. Andrei Rublev moves past Tsitsipas and Casper Ruud to return to the number 6 spot after winning his second career Masters 1000 title. Yuri Lehechka jumps 8 spots after making the semis and is back at a career-high number 23 in the world. Mariano Navone and Alejandro Tabillo each reach new career highs after gaining plenty of points from their challenger titles last week, and they're now knocking on the door of the top 30. Rafa's mini run was enough to see him move 207 spots up, and he's now on the verge of re-entering the top 300. And now to some of the guys who are going to be sliding down the ranking. Jan-Lennard Struff falls 17 spots after failing to defend his finalist points from Madrid last year. Borna Coric falls more than 20 spots and outside the top 50 following his early round loss to Zverev. Andy Murray has now slipped outside the top 75. Murray has been dealt a heavy hand with injuries, which kinda sucks to see. Aslan Karatsev is now at risk of falling outside the top 100 after failing to defend his semi-finalist points from Madrid last year. Taking a look at the WTA, Iga Swiatek puts some daylight between herself and the rest of the pack with a 3,400 point gap following her title win in Madrid. Sabalenka holds on to her number 2 spot for now. Madison Keys moves 4 spots up to number 16 after reaching the semis, and despite her early loss in Madrid, Marta Kostyuk enters the top 20 and hits a new career high. Yulia Putintseva also goes 9 spots up to 41 after getting to the quarterfinals. The Italian Open draw is out, and here's what it looks like. Novak Djokovic has Casper Ruud, Ben Shelton, and Karen Khachanov as some of the big names in his quarter. It'll be interesting to see a Novak-Casper rematch. I think Novak has a pretty straightforward path to the quarterfinal, and I don't see anyone stopping him. Casper Ruud has reached the semis in his last 3 outings in Rome, so he's known for playing great here, but I don't think Novak's gonna let him beat him twice in a row. My upset alert in this quarter would be Ben Shelton simply because of his limited experience on European clay. My dark horse here could be Francisco Cerundolo. He beat Zverev in Madrid and is a real threat on the surface. In the second quarter, Zverev has Dimitrov, Fritz, Griekspoor, and Musetti as some of the top seeds. The German would be looking to rebound from a disappointing Madrid outing, and I think he also has a pretty straightforward path to the quarterfinal. I'm not going to talk too much about Zverev for now, because I'm considering doing a deep dive on him. Upset alert here would be Dimitrov. He hasn't made it past the round of 32 in the last 3 tournaments, and judging from his disappointing loss in Madrid, I won't be expecting too much from him. I know the playing conditions are different, but still, for my dark horse here, I would pick Tallon Griekspoor. His confidence from beating Rune in Madrid may help him here in Rome. The third quarter of the draw is stacked. Rublev leads the quarter, but has a potential quarterfinal matchup with one of Stefano Tsitsipas, Alex de Minaur, Ugo Humbert, Nico Jarry, or Felix Auger-Aliassime. I don't think Rublev's attacking brand of tennis is going to be rewarded the way it was at the high altitudes in Madrid, but we know at least he has the power to blast anyone off the court. He won Monte Carlo, which is literally one of the slowest tournaments last year, and then Madrid this year, so we know he can play anywhere. Is he going to have a hangover from his Madrid title win? Maybe. It's why I might consider him as my upset alert, because I'm assuming the recovery time just might not be enough for him. But you never know. Tsitsipas just lost to a guy ranked outside the top 100 in Madrid. I'll assume it was a one-off and back him to reach the quarterfinal in Rome. I'll go for either Matteo Berrettini or Jan-Lennard Struff as the dark horses here. It's Berrettini's home tournament. He has 4 titles on clay and can perform at a high level on the surface, so it's a no-brainer for me here. In the fourth quarter, we have Medvedev as the top seed, followed by Hurkacz, Rune, Tommy Paul, and these other guys. Rafa is also here. Medvedev has now reached the quarterfinals or better in all 9 Masters 1000 events, and he just got his 100th win in a Masters event over Bublik in Madrid. Medvedev was having a pretty good week until the injury, so we might not see that Klayvedev version that we saw lifting the title last year. I don't know the extent of his injury, so this one is a little tough to say, but for my upset alert, it would have to be Frances Tiafoe. After losing to a guy that was on a 15-match losing streak, Big Foe decided to play in the Cagliari Challenger to find some form, but didn't even make it past the first round there. He's still searching. Now, I might get ripped for this take, but my dark horse here would be Nadal. Pretty weird having Rafa as a dark horse, but we know things have changed. His movement seems a little compromised on the left to me, but I was happy with what I saw in Madrid, and for that reason, I'm backing him to make a deep run in Rome, but truth be told, he has his work cut out for him. We know that Saudi Arabia is looking to host a new Masters 1000 event in January, starting from 2027. What are your thoughts on that as well? Last week in Madrid was stacked on the tennis tour, but it's going to get even more intense as Roland Garros edges closer. You can keep up on all the action from the ATP and WTA tours by smashing that subscribe button. And if you missed out on last week's videos, don't sweat it, I have them showing on the screen for you right here.